She laughed in his face when he couldn't afford the coffee. Then, her world shattered when she saw his name on the deed to the entire street. The morning air in Riverside carried the scent of fresh pastries and brewing coffee, the kind of quiet charm that made people stop mid-step just to breathe it in. The cafe sat on the corner of Maple and Third, its brick exterior softened by ivy that climbed the walls like gentle fingers. Inside, sunlight poured through tall windows, casting warm rectangles across worn wooden tables that had witnessed 1,000 conversations, 1,000 moments of ordinary magic. Marcus Chen wiped down the espresso machine with practiced care, his movements steady and unhurried. He had opened the cafe 2 hours earlier, just as dawn broke over the rooftops, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. His shirt was simple, a faded blue button-down, with sleeves rolled to his elbows. His jeans were worn at the knees. A canvas apron hung loosely around his waist, stained with coffee and flour from the morning's baking. Nothing about him suggested wealth. Nothing about him demanded attention. He moved through the space like he belonged to it, restocking cups, adjusting chairs, sweeping crumbs from beneath tables. When customers arrived, he greeted them with quiet warmth, remembering their names, their usual orders, the small details that made them feel seen. By mid-morning, the cafe hummed with life. College students hunched over laptops. An elderly couple shared a croissant. A mother bounced a toddler on her knee while sipping tea. Marcus moved between them all, refilling cups, clearing plates, his presence as comforting as the smell of cinnamon rolls baking in the back. He had been doing this for 3 months now, 3 months of early mornings and late nights. 3 months of pretending to be exactly what he appeared to be, a simple cafe owner trying to make ends meet. No one knew who he really was. No one suspected that the man pouring their coffee controlled a commercial real estate empire worth billions, that he owned not just this building, but every building on this street and 3 more blocks beyond it. Marcus had built his fortune through careful acquisitions, smart investments, and an almost obsessive attention to detail. By 32, he had achieved everything his father had dreamed of and more. But somewhere along the way, surrounded by boardrooms and quarterly reports, he had lost track of something essential. He had forgotten what it felt like to be valued for who he was rather than what he owned. So he had walked away. Not permanently, not completely, but enough to breathe, enough to remember. His assistant, Jennifer, ran the company in his absence. His lawyers handled the paperwork. His accountants managed the investments. And Marcus? Marcus made coffee and listened to strangers talk about their days, their dreams, their disappointments. It was the most honest he had felt in years. The bell above the door chimed softly. Marcus glanced up from the register, expecting another regular face. Instead, a woman stepped inside, and something in the air shifted. She was striking, not in an obvious way, but in the way confidence makes someone luminous. Her dark hair fell in perfect waves past her shoulders. Her dress was designer, sleek black fabric that probably cost more than most people's rent. Diamond studs glittered at her ears. Her heels clicked sharply against the wooden floor as she approached the counter, phone pressed to her ear. "No, I told you to schedule it for 3, not 4, she said into the phone, her tone clipped with impatience. "If they can't accommodate that, find someone who can." She paused at the counter, eyes scanning the menu board without really seeing it. Marcus waited, patient. "Hold on," she said into the phone, then lowered it slightly, looking at him for the first time. Her gaze was quick, assessing, dismissive. "Large oat milk latte, extra hot. And make it quick, I have a meeting in 20 minutes. No please, no acknowledgement of him as anything more than a service, just an order, delivered like he was part of the furniture. Marcus nodded. "Coming right up." He moved to the espresso machine, his hand steady, as he ground the beans, tamped them down, pulled the shot. The machine hissed and gurgled. Steam rose in soft white clouds. He poured the oat milk with careful precision, creating a delicate leaf pattern in the foam, a small act of artistry no one had asked for, but that he provided anyway. When he set the cup on the counter, the woman was still on her phone, her back half turned. "That'll be $6.50, Marcus said quietly. She turned, reaching into her designer handbag without looking at him. Her fingers emerged with a black credit card. She held it out, eyes still on her phone screen. Marcus took it, swiped it through the reader. A moment passed, then another. The screen flashed red. "I'm sorry," he said gently. "It's been declined." The woman's head snapped up. "What?" "Your card," Marcus repeated, keeping his voice even. "It didn't go through." Her expression shifted from surprise to irritation. "That's impossible. Try it again." He did. Same result. "Do you have another form of payment?" he asked. Her jaw tightened. She dug through her bag again, pulling out another card. "Here. Use this one." Marcus swiped it, declined. A flush crept up her neck. Around them, other customers had begun to notice. Conversations quieted. Eyes drifted toward the counter. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, searching through her wallet with increasing urgency. No cash, no other cards that worked. Just the mounting realization that she could not pay for a $6 coffee. Marcus watched her, saw the exact moment embarrassment transformed into something sharper, something defensive. "You know what?" she said, her voice rising slightly. "Your machine is probably broken. This happens all the time at these little places. You should really upgrade your equipment if you want to compete." "The machine is working fine," Marcus said calmly. "Other customers have used cards this morning without issue." Her eyes narrowed. She looked at him then, really looked, taking in his worn jeans, his stained apron, his lack of expensive accessories. "Of course you'd say that," she said, her tone dripping with disdain. "Look, I don't have time for this. I'll pay you back later." She reached for the coffee. Marcus gently moved it back. "I'm sorry, but I can't give it to you without payment." Something in her expression hardened. She straightened, pulling herself to her full height, which even in heels barely matched his. "Do you know who I am?" she asked, her voice cold. Marcus said nothing. "I'm Victoria Ashford. I run a consulting firm downtown. I work with some of the wealthiest clients in this city." She gestured around the small cafe dismissively. "I probably spend more on a single dinner than you make in a month." The words hung in the air, sharp and cutting. Other customers had stopped pretending not to listen. An uncomfortable silence settled over the space. Marcus kept his expression neutral, his voice quiet. "That may be true, but right now you still need to pay for the coffee." Victoria's laugh was brittle, almost cruel. "You're really going to stand there and lecture me about $6? You, working in this—" She waved her hand vaguely. "This little cafe that probably barely breaks even?" She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping but still loud enough for others to hear. "Let me give you some free advice. The reason you're stuck serving coffee while people like me run actual businesses? It's because you don't understand how the world works. You think everything is about following little rules, charging exact change, playing it safe." She picked up her phone, checking the time with exaggerated frustration. "I don't date poor men. I don't waste time in places like this. And I certainly don't get lectured by people who will never understand what real success looks like." Marcus absorbed each word without flinching. He had heard variations of this speech before, in boardrooms, at networking events, from people who measured worth in dollar signs and designer labels. But hearing it here, in this small space he had built as a refuge from exactly that kind of thinking, struck something deeper. "I'm sorry you feel that way," he said simply. Victoria grabbed her bags, her movements sharp with irritation. "Keep your coffee. I'll go somewhere that actually values their customers." She turned on her heel and strode toward the door, her exit as dramatic as her entrance. The bell chimed as she left, and then she was gone, leaving behind only the faint scent of expensive perfume and the uncomfortable silence of witnesses. Marcus stood behind the counter, hands resting lightly on the worn wood. Around him, customers slowly returned to their conversations, their voices hushed at first, then gradually building back to normal volume. An older man at a corner table caught Marcus's eye and shook his head sympathetically. A young woman mouthed the word sorry from her laptop. The mother, with the toddler, gave him a small, understanding smile. Marcus nodded to each of them, then turned back to the espresso machine. He poured the rejected latte down the sink, watching the foam swirl and disappear. His hands were steady. His expression was calm, but inside something had shifted. He thought about Victoria's words, about the assumption that his life was small, his dreams limited, his understanding of success narrow. He thought about how easily people judged based on appearances, how quickly they dismissed those they deemed beneath them. And he thought about the irony, the beautiful, bitter irony that the woman who had just insulted him for being poor, for being stuck, for never understanding real success, had been standing in a building he owned, on a street he controlled, in a neighborhood he had personally revitalized, speaking to a man whose net worth exceeded hers by a factor she probably could not even comprehend. But Marcus said nothing, did nothing, just cleaned the steam wand, wiped down the counter, and moved on to the next customer. Because that was the point of all this, to be seen for who he was, not what he owned, to understand how the world treated people based on perception rather than reality. Victoria had given him exactly the lesson he had been seeking, even if she had no idea she had done so. The rest of the morning passed in its usual rhythm. Coffee brewed, pastries were served, conversations flowed. Marcus moved through it all with his characteristic quiet efficiency, present but not intrusive, helpful but not hovering. Around noon, as the lunch rush began to build, Jennifer called. "How's the experiment going?" she asked, her voice warm with amusement. She was the only person who knew about Marcus's sabbatical, his deliberate choice to step away from the empire he had built. "Interesting," Marcus replied, tucking the phone between his shoulder and ear as he assembled a sandwich. "Had someone tell me this morning that I'll never understand real success." Jennifer laughed. "Oh, the irony. Please tell me you told them." "No," Marcus said. "That wasn't the point." "You're more patient than I am," Jennifer said. "I would have pulled up the property records right there." "And proven what?" "That I'm rich?" Marcus paused, adding lettuce to the sandwich with careful precision. "I already knew that. What I'm learning is how differently people treat you when they think you're not." "Profound," Jennifer said dryly. "Also, you have a board meeting next month you can't skip. Just warning you now." "I'll be there," Marcus promised. After he hung up, Marcus stood for a moment in the quiet space behind the counter. Through the front window, he could see Riverside's main street bustling with afternoon activity. People walked past carrying shopping bags, pushing strollers, holding hands. Ordinary lives unfolding in ordinary ways. This was what he had been missing, this connection, this groundedness, this reminder that beneath all the wealth and power and corporate maneuvering were just people trying to make it through their days with a little bit of grace and kindness. Victoria Ashford had looked at him and seen someone beneath her, someone not worth basic courtesy, someone whose time and effort did not matter, because his bank account presumably did not match hers. She had been wrong. But more importantly, she had revealed something essential about herself, about the world she moved through, about the values she held. Marcus had spent years in that same world. He had sat in boardrooms where people like Victoria decided the fates of companies, of neighborhoods, of lives. He had watched how easily compassion got discarded in favor of profit, how quickly human dignity became negotiable when money was on the line. That was why he was here. That was why he wore the stained apron and served coffee and pretended to be ordinary. Because somewhere along the way, he had started to become the kind of person who forgot that everyone mattered, regardless of what they could offer him. He never wanted to be that person again. As the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the cafe floor, Marcus made a decision. He pulled out his phone and texted Jennifer. "Send me the full property report for Riverside, every building, every lease, every tenant. I want to know exactly what we own here." Her reply came quickly. "Planning something?" "Maybe," Marcus typed back. "Or maybe just remembering what matters." He slipped the phone back into his pocket and returned to the counter, ready for the next customer, the next conversation, the next small moment of connection that reminded him why any of this mattered at all. 3 days passed before Victoria returned. Marcus noticed her the moment she stepped through the door, her presence announced by the familiar click of expensive heels against worn wood. She wore a different outfit this time, a crisp white blouse tucked into tailored gray pants, but the same confidence radiated from her like armor. He was behind the counter, arranging fresh pastries in the display case. He straightened slowly, wiping his hands on his apron, and waited. Victoria approached with purpose, her expression carefully neutral. She stopped at the counter, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "I need to apologize," she said finally, the words coming out stiff, rehearsed. "The other day I was stressed about a meeting, and I took it out on you." "That wasn't professional." Marcus studied her face. The apology was there, technically, but something felt hollow about it, like words spoken because they should be, not because they were truly felt. "I appreciate that," he said quietly. Victoria nodded, seeming relieved to have the awkward moment behind her. "So can I get that latte now?" "I have my wallet sorted out." She pulled out cash this time, placing a $20 bill on the counter with a small, practiced smile. Marcus made the drink in silence, the espresso machine filling the space between them with its familiar hiss and gurgle. When he handed her the cup, their fingers briefly touched, and he saw something flicker in her eyes, something calculating. "You know," she said, leaning slightly against the counter, "I've been thinking. You seem like you're good at what you do here. Have you ever considered doing something more with your life?" Marcus's eyebrows rose slightly. "More? I mean, this is fine for now." She gestured around the cafe with her free hand. "But you're clearly intelligent. With the right guidance, the right connections, you could probably work your way up to managing a real restaurant, maybe even a small chain someday." She said it like she was offering him the world, like her vision of his potential was a gift he should be grateful for. "That's thoughtful of you to consider," Marcus said, his tone carefully even. "I'm serious," Victoria continued, warming to her subject. "I have clients in the restaurant industry. I could make some introductions, put in a good word. You'd have to work hard, obviously, start at the bottom, but in 5 or 10 years, you could be making decent money." 5 or 10 years, decent money. Marcus almost smiled at the irony. "What would you want in return?" he asked. Victoria's expression shifted, became more genuine for the first time. "Honestly, I'm new to the neighborhood. I just moved into a condo a few blocks from here. I don't really know anyone yet, and it would be nice to have someone to grab coffee with. Someone real, you know? Not all the fake corporate types I deal with at work." There it was, the real reason for the apology, for the sudden interest. Not genuine remorse, but loneliness dressed up as opportunity. Marcus recognized the pattern. He had seen it countless times in his other life. People who kept others at arm's length until they needed something, then suddenly discovered the value of connection. "I'll think about it," he said simply. Victoria's smile brightened. "Great. Here, let me give you my number." She pulled out a business card, expensive cardstock with raised lettering, and slid it across the counter. "Text me sometime. We can talk more about your future." She left with her latte, and Marcus stood holding her card, reading the elegant script. Victoria Ashford, Senior Consultant, Ashford Advisory Group, a downtown address, a cell number, an email. He tucked it into his apron pocket and returned to work. Over the following weeks, Victoria became a regular. She appeared every few days, always during off-peak hours when the cafe was quieter. She would order her latte, then linger at a corner table, working on her laptop or making phone calls. Sometimes she would wave Marcus over during his breaks, patting the chair across from her in invitation. "Sit with me for a minute," she would say. "You've been on your feet all morning." At first, Marcus declined politely, citing work that needed doing. But Victoria was persistent, and eventually he began to accept. Their conversation started surface level. The weather, neighborhood changes, her complaints about difficult clients. "You're easy to talk to," she told him one afternoon, stirring sugar into her coffee. "Most men I meet, they're always trying to impress me, talking about their cars, their investments, their connections. It's exhausting." "Maybe they think that's what you want to hear," Marcus offered. Victoria paused, considering this. "Maybe. I do date successful men. I work hard. I've built something real with my business. I want a partner who understands that world, who can match my ambition." "That makes sense," Marcus said. "But sometimes," she continued, her voice dropping slightly, "I wonder if any of them actually see me, or if they just see what I represent. Success, status, a trophy." The vulnerability in her words surprised him. For a moment the armor cracked and Marcus glimpsed something genuine underneath. "I think," he said carefully, "that everyone wants to be seen for who they really are, not what they've accomplished or what they own. Just them." Victoria looked at him then, really looked, and something shifted in her expression. "You're different from what I thought at first." "People usually are," Marcus replied. Their friendship, if it could be called that, continued to develop. Victoria began sharing more about her life. Her consulting firm was successful, but demanding. She worked 60-hour weeks, managing difficult clients and impossible deadlines. Her relationships never lasted long. Men either felt threatened by her success or tried to compete with it. "I went on a date last week," she told Marcus one morning. "This guy showed up in a Maserati. Spent the entire dinner talking about his real estate portfolio, how many properties he owns, how much they're worth. He didn't ask me a single question about myself." Marcus wiped down a nearby table, listening. "I appreciate ambition," Victoria continued, "but there's a difference between being successful and being obsessed with proving it, you know?" "I do," Marcus said quietly. Victoria smiled. "See, this is why I like talking to you. You get it. You're grounded, real." The irony was not lost on Marcus. Here was a woman complaining about men who flaunted their wealth, seeking refuge in conversation with someone she believed to be the opposite, someone humble, someone safe, someone who would never threaten her sense of superiority. She still had not learned his last name, had never asked what he did before opening the cafe, had never wondered how a man in his early 30s could afford to run a business in an increasingly expensive neighborhood. She saw what she wanted to see, nothing more. One evening, as Marcus was closing up, Victoria appeared at the door. It was past 9, the street outside dark, except for the warm glow of street lamps. "I know you're closed," she said through the glass, "but I had the worst day, and I just needed to see a friendly face." Marcus unlocked the door and let her in. She collapsed into a chair, dropping her designer bag onto the table with a heavy thud. "I lost a client today," she said, her voice tight. "A big one. They said my approach was too aggressive, that I cared more about results than people." She laughed bitterly, like those are mutually exclusive. Marcus made her a chamomile tea without asking, the way he had learned she liked it when she was stressed. He set it in front of her gently. "Thank you," she whispered, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. They sat in silence for a while, the cafe around them dark except for a single lamp Marcus had left on behind the counter. "Can I ask you something?" Victoria said finally. "Of course." "Do you ever feel like you're pretending, like you're playing a role that everyone expects, but deep down, you're not sure who you really are?" Marcus met her eyes across the table. "Every day." She nodded slowly. "I thought so." "You seem like someone who understands that." "What makes you think I'm pretending?" he asked. Victoria shrugged. "I don't know. Sometimes you get this look, like you're watching everything from a distance, like you're here but not quite here. Does that make sense?" "It does," Marcus admitted. "Who are you really?" she asked softly. "When you're not making coffee and being nice to difficult customers like me?" It was the closest she had ever come to asking, the closest to seeing past the surface. Marcus considered telling her, considered explaining that the man she thought she knew was only a fraction of who he really was, that he understood her world far better than she realized, that he had built and owned more than she could imagine. But then he thought about why he was here in the first place, about the lesson he was still learning, about how people revealed themselves when they thought you were safe, when they thought you were less than them. "I'm just someone trying to figure things out," he said instead. "Same as everyone." Victoria seemed satisfied with this answer. She finished her tea, thanked him quietly, and left. Marcus locked the door behind her and stood alone in the dark cafe, wondering how much longer he could maintain this double life, wondering what would happen when the truth finally came out. Because it would come out. It always did. The catalyst arrived on a Tuesday morning in the form of a registered letter. Marcus was restocking the pastry case when the courier entered, clipboard in hand. "Delivery for the property owner," he announced. Several customers glanced up. Victoria, sitting at her usual table, looked over curiously. "That would be me," Marcus said, signing for the envelope. The courier left, and Marcus tucked the letter into his apron pocket, planning to read it later. But Victoria had seen the exchange. He noticed her eyes following him as he moved back behind the counter, a question forming in her expression. "Property owner?" she called out. "I thought you just worked here." Marcus paused. "I own the cafe," he said simply. It was not technically a lie. He did own it. He just owned significantly more than that. Victoria's eyebrows rose. "Really? I had no idea. That's impressive." She seemed genuinely pleased, like she had just discovered something valuable about him. Over the next few days, her attention intensified. She arrived earlier, stayed longer, she asked questions about the business, offered unsolicited advice about marketing and expansion. "You could really grow this place," she said one afternoon. "Maybe open a second location. I could help you with the business plan, introduce you to some investors." Marcus listened patiently, neither accepting nor rejecting her offers. Then came the day everything changed. It started when Victoria's phone rang during her morning coffee. Marcus was wiping down tables nearby and could not help but overhear. "What do you mean the lease is being renegotiated?" Victoria's voice rose slightly. "I just moved in 6 months ago. The terms were locked for 2 years. A pause as she listened. "Who owns the building? I need to speak with them directly." Another pause, longer this time. Marcus saw her expression shift from irritation to confusion. "Westwood Holdings. I've never heard of them. Find out who runs it and set up a meeting. Today, if possible." She ended the call and sat staring at her phone, clearly frustrated. Marcus continued cleaning, saying nothing. "My landlord is apparently owned by some mysterious holding company," Victoria said to the room at large. "They want to raise my rent by 30%. Can you believe that?" Around the cafe, other customers murmured sympathetically. Rent increases were a common complaint in the neighborhood. "Do you know anything about Westwood Holdings?" Victoria asked Marcus. "They supposedly own half the buildings around here." Marcus straightened, meeting her eyes. "I've heard the name. Well, whoever they are, they're about to get an earful from me." "I don't care how big they are. You can't just push people around because you have money." The irony of that statement coming from her was almost painful. "Maybe they have reasons," Marcus offered quietly. Victoria's expression hardened. "There's no good reason to displace people for profit. That's just greed." Marcus said nothing, but inside something was shifting, a decision forming. That evening, after closing, he called Jennifer. "I need you to send me all the lease agreements for Riverside, every single one. And I need the breakdown on rent increases we approved last quarter." Are you coming back? Jennifer asked, hope coloring her voice. Not yet, Marcus said, but I think it's time to stop hiding. The next morning, Marcus arrived at the cafe earlier than usual. He wore different clothes, dark slacks, a pressed shirt, leather shoes instead of his usual worn sneakers. His hair was combed back instead of falling casually over his forehead. When Victoria entered at her usual time, she did a double take. Wow, she said, approaching the counter. You clean up nice. Special occasion? Actually, yes, Marcus said. I have a meeting later with Westwood Holdings. Victoria's eyes widened. You? Why? They want to discuss some property matters, Marcus said carefully. Apparently they're looking for local business owners' input on neighborhood development. This was true, technically. He had scheduled a meeting with his own company. He would be on both sides of the table. That's perfect, Victoria said excitedly. You have to tell them about the rent increases, about how they're pushing people out. You'll have a chance to make them see reason. Marcus poured her latte in silence, considering his next words carefully. Victoria, can I ask you something? Of course. When you first came in here, you made certain assumptions about me. About my life, my success, my worth. Do you remember that? Victoria's face flushed slightly. I apologized for that. You did, Marcus agreed. But did you mean it? Or were you just smoothing things over because you wanted something from me? She blinked, taken aback. That's not fair. Isn't it? Marcus set the latte on the counter but did not slide it toward her. You've been coming here for weeks. We've had dozens of conversations. You've told me about your dating life, your frustrations with men who care too much about money and status. But have you ever once asked me about my life beyond this counter? Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it. You don't even know my last name, Marcus continued, his voice quiet but firm. You never asked where I'm from, what I studied, what I did before this. You saw an apron and worn jeans and decided you knew everything you needed to know. That's not true, Victoria protested, but her voice lacked conviction. You told me you don't date poor men, Marcus said. You made it clear that success, real success, was something I would never understand. You offered to help me climb my way up to maybe, possibly someday, managing a small chain restaurant. I was trying to be helpful. You were being condescending, Marcus interrupted gently. You were offering crumbs from your table because you thought I was starving. But you never stopped to wonder if maybe, just maybe, I was sitting at a table of my own. Victoria stared at him, her expression shifting between confusion and something that looked like dawning realization. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, not Victoria's card, which he still had, his own. He slid it across the counter. Victoria picked it up with trembling fingers. Her eyes scanned the text once, twice, 3 times. Marcus Westwood, Chief Executive Officer, Westwood Holdings. The color drained from her face. That's not possible, she whispered. I assure you it is, Marcus said calmly. But you work here, you make coffee, you wear... She gestured helplessly at his clothes. I own this cafe, Marcus said, and the building it's in, and the building you live in, and the building next to that one, and the one after that. I own 47 properties in this neighborhood, Victoria. Westwood Holdings isn't some faceless corporation. It's me. Victoria sank into the nearest chair, the business card still clutched in her hand. Why? She finally asked, her voice barely audible. Why would you pretend to be someone you're not? I wasn't pretending, Marcus said. I was being exactly who I am. Just without the labels and assumptions that come with my last name. I wanted to know how people treat you when they think you have nothing to offer them, when they think you're beneath them. He came around the counter and sat across from her, his movements deliberate and calm. And I learned something important, he continued. I learned that some people are kind, regardless of what you can do for them. The elderly man who always says thank you. The young mother who asks about my day, even when her toddler is crying. The college student who leaves his last $2 in the tip jar. Marcus paused, holding Victoria's gaze. And I learned that some people only see value in others when it serves them. You weren't interested in me when you thought I was just a cafe owner. You dismissed me, insulted me, made assumptions about my intelligence and my future. But the moment you found out I owned this building, suddenly I became worth your time. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I didn't mean, I wasn't trying to. I know you weren't trying, Marcus said gently. That's what makes it worse. This is just how you move through the world, categorizing people, deciding their worth based on their bank accounts and their zip codes. That's not who I am, Victoria protested weakly. Isn't it? Marcus asked. You told me you don't date poor men. You made it clear that financial success was a requirement for your respect. You've spent weeks telling me about men who flaunt their wealth, complaining that they only care about money, all while doing the exact same thing from the other side. Victoria wiped at her eyes with shaking hands. Around them the cafe had gone quiet. Other customers were pretending not to listen while clearly hanging on every word. The rent increase you're so angry about, Marcus continued. It's part of a neighborhood revitalization plan that I've spent 3 years developing. We're renovating buildings, improving infrastructure, creating mixed-income housing. Yes, some rents are going up, but we're also subsidizing 30% of units for lower-income families. We're investing in local businesses. We're building a community center. He leaned forward slightly. I didn't raise your rent because I'm greedy. I raised it because you can afford it, and that money is going toward making sure other people aren't displaced. But you assume the worst because that's what you always assume about people with money, unless they're you. Victoria sat frozen, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. I'm not telling you this to humiliate you, Marcus said more softly. I'm telling you because I want you to understand something. Wealth doesn't make you better than anyone. Poverty doesn't make you less than anyone. What matters is how you treat people when you think they have nothing to offer you. That's the real measure of character. He stood, gently taking the business card from her limp fingers. Your rent increase stands, he said. But I'm also offering you something. Come to the community meeting next week. Meet the people who live in these buildings. Hear their stories. See what we're actually trying to build here. Marcus walked back behind the counter, retrieving her latte. He set it in front of her, still warm. This one's on the house, he said quietly. Not because you can't afford it, but because everyone deserves kindness, even when they don't think to offer it themselves. Victoria looked up at him, tears streaming down her face now. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. I know, Marcus said. The question is, what are you going to do about it? He left her sitting there, returning to his work. Other customers slowly resumed their conversations. The moment passed, but its weight remained. Victoria sat for a long time, staring at her untouched coffee. Finally, she stood, gathered her things, and walked to the door. She paused at the threshold, looking back at Marcus. Thank you, she said simply. Then she was gone. Marcus continued his day, serving customers, making drinks, cleaning tables. But something had shifted. The experiment was over. The lesson had been taught, and more importantly, learned. Not just by Victoria. By him. 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in the community center's main hall, watching people filter in for the neighborhood meeting. Families, business owners, longtime residents, newcomers. A cross-section of Riverside's diverse population. Victoria was there too. She sat in the back row, notepad in hand, listening intently as speaker after speaker shared their thoughts on the revitalization plan. After the formal presentations ended, Marcus opened the floor to questions. Hands shot up. Concerns were raised. Ideas were shared. It was messy and complicated, and exactly what democracy should look like. During the break, Victoria approached him, more hesitant than he had ever seen her. I've been doing research, she said, into Westwood Holdings. your projects, your community initiatives. You've been doing this kind of work for years, haven't you? Building things that matter. Trying to, Marcus said. I wanted to apologize again, properly this time, not because I want something from you, but because I genuinely understand now how wrong I was, about you, about what matters, about everything. Marcus studied her face and saw something different there. The armor was gone. What remained was just a person, flawed and trying. Apology accepted, he said. Victoria nodded, relief washing over her features. I also wanted to tell you something. I'm starting a pro bono consulting program for small business owners who can't afford services like mine, people who are trying to build something real but don't have the connections or resources. She smiled slightly. A very wise cafe owner once told me that how you treat people when they have nothing to offer you is what matters. I want to start living that way. Marcus felt something warm bloom in his chest. That sounds like a good start. Will you come back to the cafe? Victoria asked. I mean, actually work there again? Or was that just temporary? I think I'll keep it going, Marcus said. Maybe hire some help so I'm not there every day. But yeah, I'll be around. Good, Victoria said, because I still need my morning coffee. And maybe, if you're willing, a friend who'll tell me the truth even when I don't want to hear it. Marcus smiled. I think I can do that. As the meeting resumed, Marcus watched his community come together, sharing ideas, solving problems, building something bigger than any one person's agenda. This was what wealth was really for. Not to elevate yourself above others, but to lift others up alongside you. Not to build walls, but to create bridges. Victoria had learned that lesson the hard way. And in teaching it, Marcus had remembered why it mattered. The cafe continued its quiet existence. Marcus returned to his routines, splitting time between the espresso machine and the boardroom. He never hid his identity again, but he never flaunted it either. Victoria became a regular again, but different now. She learned the names of other customers, said please and thank you, left generous tips not out of obligation, but genuine appreciation. She even started volunteering at the literacy program the community center launched, reading to children whose families could not afford books. One morning, several months later, she arrived at the cafe and found Marcus training a new employee, a young man from the neighborhood who had been struggling to find work. This is David, Marcus introduced them. He's going to be taking over most of the day-to-day operations. Does this mean you're leaving? Victoria asked, trying to hide her disappointment. Just stepping back a little, Marcus said, but I'll still be around. Someone has to make sure the coffee stays good. Victoria smiled. Well, I for one am glad you stuck around. Even if you did completely upend my worldview. Sometimes that's exactly what we need, Marcus replied. As Victoria sat with her latte, watching Marcus teach David the intricacies of the espresso machine, with the same patience he had shown her, she reflected on how much had changed. She had walked into this cafe months ago believing she knew exactly how the world worked, believing success was measured in dollars and designer labels, believing some people mattered more than others. She had been so spectacularly wrong. Real wealth, she understood now, was not what you owned but what you gave. Not how high you climbed, but how many people you brought with you. Not the size of your bank account, but the size of your heart. And the man who had taught her that lesson? He had done it not with grand gestures or lectures, but by simply being himself, by treating everyone with dignity, by choosing kindness over ego, by remembering that beneath every title, every tax bracket, every assumption, were just people trying their best to matter. Victoria pulled out her phone and looked at her calendar. She had a date that evening with a teacher she had met at the community center. He drove a 10-year-old car and split his free time between coaching youth soccer and writing poetry. 6 months ago, she never would have given him a chance. Now she could not wait to see him. She glanced back at Marcus, who was laughing at something David had said, his hands covered in coffee grounds and his apron stained as always. "Thank you," she said quietly, though he was too far away to hear, for the lesson, for the patience, for not giving up on her even when she had given up on herself. Outside, Riverside bustled with life. Inside the small cafe on the corner of Maple and Third, something simple and profound continued, the daily practice of seeing people for who they really were. And that, Victoria understood now, was worth more than all the wealth in the world. Thank you for sharing this moment of chance, connection, and meaning. If this story reminded you that true worth is measured not by what we own, but by how we treat others, then please subscribe to Lucky Encounters. We bring you heartfelt tales of serendipity, where a simple twist of life can change everything. Until next time, stay humble, stay kind, and remember, sometimes the richest person in the room is the one you least expect. Subscribe now.